and this is going to look like this. So it's mostly just a Google map that of course centers on the rider's location, and of course as I update that location, it updates the map accordingly. But we've also got this call an Uber button, which when we press it, it changes to cancel Uber. And if we have a look on our past dashboard, we now have an object called request, which is a store of all of the active Uber requests. And we've got the username of the requester as well as their location in a pass geopoint. And you're going to need to use geopoints to store the location. One other small hint as well is that you'll need to have a state variable, which can just be a Boolean and will tell the app whether an Uber request is active or not and show the appropriate label on the button, and then either create or cancel a request when the button is pressed. So not an easy one by any means. You might decide you'd rather follow along with the video here, and that would be absolutely fine. But either way, good luck. I'll give you a moment now to pause the video and give it a try. Hope it goes well. Alright, so here goes. I'm going to start, of course, by creating our new activity. We'll do it from the gallery, and we're going to want a Google Maps activity. I'll call it the rider activity. And we'll need to do a fair bit of setup to get this working. Hopefully you remember, first off, we copy that URL and then jump over to our browser and paste it in. Here we go. So I'm going to create a new project. So I'm just going to click continue. And then that's enabled the API. So let's get our API key to use in our app. And here we go. So there's the key. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard, head back over to Android Studio, and then paste that in without the space at the end. Great. I'm just going to remove those tabs just in case they cause any problems. There we go, and then check. Ends with a 0, starts with an A. Is that right? Yes, it is. Okay. So we're now good to go with our map. Let's start in our main activity by creating our redirect. And we want to do that in two places, in the onCreate method and also in the getStarted method when the button is pressed. So let's set it up as a method. I'll call it redirect activity. So again, we'll check to see if the current user is a rider or a driver. So if pass user dot get current user dot get rider or driver, and we'll see if that's equal to rider, and if it is, we'll set up an intent to use the application context and jump to the rider activity. There we go. So we'll do that here. And also here. Great. So that will redirect us to the rider activity if the user is a rider. Now we need to set up our Google Map to show the user's location. So it's been a while since we did this, but we have done it several times, so hopefully it'll come flooding back to you. We'll create a location manager called location manager and a location listener called location listener. And then in the onMapReady method, we set up the manager and the listener. So we'll start with location manager. And this is going to be location manager using this .get system service and then context dot location service. And then we've got location listener, which is a new location listener. And the main bit that we're interested in is on location changed. And what we want to do here is update the map with the user's location. So to do that, we're going to need a lat lung for the user location, which is going to be a new lat lung. And we'll get that from the location up here. So location.get latitude and location.get longitude. And then we take our map and we move the camera using camera update factory, and we'll move them to a new lat lung, that location being user location. And we'll also add a marker to show them exactly where they are. So add marker, new marker options, and we're going to set the position to the user location, and I'll also set the title to your location. And one thing we should remember to do before we add that marker is clear any existing markers. Otherwise we'll get markers all over the place as the user moves around. Alright, so that's all done except for the permission side of things, and possibly a semicolon at the end of there as well. So we no longer need the Sydney marker. So we'll take our location manager and request location updates using the GPS provider, and we'll get the updates whether they move any kind of distance and any kind of time, and we'll apply location listener as the method to be run when we have a location update. Now we only want to do that directly if they're on a version earlier than Marshmallow. So we'll check for build version SDK integer to be less than 23. So if that's the case, then we'll request their location directly. If it's not, we need to ask for permission more directly. So we'll check to see if we already have this permission. So we look for context compatibility.check self permission, and we're checking for this activity to see if it has manifest.permission.access fine location. So we want to see if that is not equal to package manager.permission granted. So if that's the case, we don't have permission, so we need to ask for it. So activity compat.request permissions for this activity, and we're going to create an array of strings with a single value, which is manifest dot permission dot access find location, and our request code will just be a 1. And another else, this means we've got permission. So firstly, we again request the location updates via the location manager. And remember, this is when the app or the activity starts. So we're going to want to get the user's last known location if we can. And we get that from location manager.get last known location via location manager.gps provider. And then we want to update the map. So I think what I'll do is I'll create a method to do that, so we're not using the same code again and again. So I'll just call it update map. Update map, and it will actually need a location, which we'll call location. And this one will get the location from up here. And this time we'll check to see if there is a last known location. And if there is, then we'll update the map with that location. All right, so we're nearly there. We just need to add a method for when the user has given us permission. So that is on request permissions result. And if we want to, we can check that request code is 1, even though we're pretty certain it will be. And then we do our usual check to see if grant results dot length is greater than 0. So if we've got a result and grant results 0 is equal to package manager dot permission granted, then we're good to go. So we're going to take location manager and request location updates via location manager.gps provider, 0 meters and 0 seconds, and location listener. And we also want to update map using the last known location. So I'll just copy that line up there. I don't think it's quite worth setting up a method just for that line, but you're obviously welcome to. And then, even though we've just checked that we have permission, we do need to do an explicit check. So context compat.check self permission, this activity manifest.permission dot access find location, and we want to check that that's equal to, this time, package manager dot permission granted. Phew. There we go. So with any luck, I haven't forgotten anything. It's worth having a quick check in the manifest to make sure we're asking for access find location. Yes, we are. That is normally added by default when you add a Google Maps activity, but it's worth checking to be sure. And I've got an interesting error here, which is almost certainly one that you'll come across at this point, because with our combination of Parse and Google Maps, we've gone over the maximum number of methods in an Android app, which is 64,000. So as always, a number of ways to fix this, but the easiest is to add what's known as multi-dex support, which essentially allows you to have more than 64,000 references in your app. And we do that by editing our build.gradle file. That's the one that says module pass starter project. And in the default config section, just add a line that says multi-dex enabled true. And then down in the dependencies, add compile com.android.support and then colon multidex colon 1.0.0 and then resync the project, and that should add multidex support to your app. Alright, so that's now synced successfully, so let's give it another try. There's a note there as well that there's a new version of multidex available, so let's update our Gradle file to take that one. And here we go. So I'm going to leave it on Rider, click Get Started, and that takes us to the new Rider activity, asking us to allow access to the device's location. So we'll click Allow, and there we go. So we've got the user's location. I think though we need to zoom in a little bit. It's a little bit too far zoomed out. So let's update our update map method to use new lat lung zoom, and then we can use user location, and I'll try a zoom level of 9, see how that looks. While we're there as well, we can test moving around the map. Remember, by choosing the location. And interestingly, it hasn't automatically redirected for me, so I'll check that in a moment, but let's have a quick look at our map while we're focusing on that. Okay, I think that's maybe a little too zoomed out. So let's increase that to 15 or so. See how that looks. And also let's see why it didn't save the user details. Aha, I think I know what it is. I think it's because although we added the rider or driver right there, we didn't save that to pass. So let's do that. We'll have save in background with a new save callback, and then we'll do the redirect activity when the data has saved. And also while we're here, there was a small mistake up here that instead of double equals, when we're comparing two strings, we should use dot equals. It's a better solution. So let's try that out. We should now, with any luck, be redirected to the map as soon as the app starts. Here we go. And there we go. So now we're in. It's now time to bring in our big request Uber button. So let's go back and do that in our activity rider. Now you may have noticed from before that activity rider at the moment is just a fragment, but that's not a problem. We can just take our button and drag it in relative to the bottom right of the screen. And I'll change the button text to call an Uber. And we'll change the ID to call Uber button. And then when it's clicked, it will run the call Uber method. Okay, so let's quickly set up the call Uber method. So public void call Uber. It's going to be called by a button, so a view, and initially we'll just do a quick call Uber. So let's just do a quick check to make sure that that's working. And then a call Uber is essentially going to be a saving of a new pass object, which is going to be an Uber request. By the way, worth noting, over here we've got our rider or driver field just there. Okay, so let's go back over to Android Studio and just check that that's all working with our button. You can see our call and Uber at the bottom there, so I'll just tap that and then we'll have a look in the logs. With any luck, we'll see our call Uber. There we go, at the bottom. Super. So to call an Uber, we're going to create a pass object, and that pass object is going to contain the username and also the location of the user that requested it. So let's write that code. We're going to create a new pass object, which I'll call a request, and this is going to be a new pass object with a class of request. And then we're going to add first the username, so put, and we'll call it username, and this is going to be pass user dot get current user dot get username. And then we'll use the last known location to save the user's location. So we've got that here. We'll need to do the check as well. So we don't need to update the map, we just need to get the location. In fact, I'll put all of this code inside that check, and I'll also check for last known location not being null, because if we don't have a location, there's not much point creating a request. And then if the location is null, we'll just do a quick toast saying could not find location, please try again later, or something like that. Okay, now for locations, Pass has a built-in data type called a geopoint. So we'll use a pass geopoint, and you can see here we create it with a latitude and a longitude. So we're going to get those from last known location dot get latitude and last known location dot get longitude. And then we'll take our request and put location as the pass geopoint. There we go. So now let's save our request with a new save callback. And then, as usual, we'll check if there was no error. Then we also want to show the user that the Uber has been requested. So we'll take the button, the call Uber button, and we'll update it to give the user the option to cancel the Uber. So let's define it up here. Call Uber button, and then in onCreate, we'll set it up. This is going to be a button from find view by ID, r.id dot call Uber button. There we go. So now we'll change call Uber button and we'll set the text to cancel Uber. So let's just check that that's all working. Once we've verified that we're up and running with that, we're going to need to have an app state that knows whether an Uber request is active or not. So it can display the right text on the button, and it can either cancel or request an Uber when the user presses that button. And here we go. So let's tap call an Uber. We can see that that's switched over to cancel Uber. So it looks like it's worked on the app side of things. Let's refresh our past dashboard and just make sure that our request has been suitably created. And there it is. Excellent. So we've got our location, which matches what we had in the app, and the username as well. Excellent. So now all that remains for the rider activity is to properly manage the calling and cancelling of an Uber. So let's start off by creating a Boolean, which will manage whether or not there's a request active. And initially it will be false. And then in the onCreate method, we'll do a check to see if there is an active request in place. So we'll need a pass query on a pass object. And this is going to be a new pass query on a pass object of the class request. And we'll call it query. And then we're going to look for where the username is equal to our current username. There we go. That's the only limit we need. So then we find in the background with a new find callback. And then if there's no error, and if we have some objects, then we're going to switch the request active to true. So request active becomes true, and we'll also change the button text. So the button was call Uber button to cancel Uber. There we go. And the last thing then that we need to change is that when the call Uber button is pressed, which is this method here, we need to check to see if a request is active. And if it is, then we're going to want to cancel the Uber. And if it isn't, then we'll go through that process of creating an Uber. Here we go. And when the Uber is created, we also need to set request active to true. So to cancel an Uber, we need to find the request, which is exactly the same process as we had in the onCreate method. So let's pop that in there. And this time, if we find a request, we're going to set request active to false, and set the text to call an Uber. I'll just check, did I do that with capitals? I did. Okay, and then we're also going to need to delete the object from our parse server. So we'll loop through. We need to create a parse object called object for all the objects returned. It's possible there might be more than one. We're only expecting one, but this will delete all of them just in case there is more than one. And then we simply want to take our object and delete in the background. And I'm not going to even have a callback for that. You can obviously add one in if you'd like. But now our app should display what we want, which is when an Uber is active, when a request is active, then it will show the cancel Uber button when we load the app. And then when we press the cancel Uber button, it will remove the Uber request from parse server and update the button and the app state as well. And here we go. You can see we've got the cancel Uber, so it's detected that there is a request active. And if we press the cancel Uber button just the once, then you can see it goes back to call an Uber. And if we refresh our data browser, our request has indeed disappeared. All right. So our app is now behaving as we want it from a rider perspective. It's now time to think about the driver. And of course, the driver then has to be able to view active requests and select them and navigate to them. And that's what we're going to find out how to do in the next video.